Vision presents Dr. Lawrence Stagger.
Dr. Stagger, would you like to address the relevance of biblical archaeology in this day and age?
Well, I think the importance of biblical archaeology, and I do accept the name and the title as being legitimate, just as I accept the name classical archaeology to apply to our neighbors to the west. It's a statement that, or a description, I would say, of what we do that looks at not only the material culture and tries to decipher it in its own systems of analysis, but also looking at all the texts that are relevant. And I don't mean just the biblical texts, but I'm referring to other ancient Near Eastern texts that may be relevant to the problem at hand. So you can't avoid the biblical material. What you should understand, though, is it has its own methods and methodology. You have to keep that under strict control as you move through these various multi-layers of a very complex book. You have to understand that it is one of the most complex ancient texts that we have to deal with. But once you do that, and once you've trained yourself in that field as well, then you may be prepared to see how that could compare with what you're finding on the ground in the earth. But so often it's done prematurely and at a very superficial level, which probably has given it a bad name in the past. But I don't hesitate to use it for the studies that I do. And in fact, we've written a book with Professor King called A Life in Biblical Israel. We use the title Biblical Israel specifically to refer to this correlation of texts. And I don't mean correlation of texts with artifacts to confirm, it also might disconfirm. Each case has to be analyzed on its own merits, and but I feel that we try to do that in that book. And as we looked at the material culture from about 1200 to 500 BCE, we found that much of the biblical material has its best location in that kind of environment, the Iron Age environment. And so that was the main period, not the Hellenistic, not the Persian, and probably not much of the Bronze Age, but the Iron Age that seems to form the matrix from which we get these texts that are now preserved in the Bible.
To what extent would you then contribute the extent of his hostility towards the idea of biblical archaeology?
Oh, I think that's a hard one to know. As people look to other places, for example, in American Schools of Oriental Research now, we have people working on Cyprus. There are only a couple references to Cyprus in the Bible. Elisha, for example, which is related to Al-Ashia of the Bronze Age. If you go to other parts of the Mediterranean, you have maybe only a tangential relationship to direct textual materials that deal with that. Even the great city, or the great city and ships of Tarshish, one can debate. Are we talking about a Tarshish in the east, such as Tarsus, or are we talking about a site in the west in Spain or Sardinia? My own feeling about it is if you take Genesis and the Table of Nations, it's much better at home in the eastern Mediterranean at a site like Tarsus than it is going off to Spain, because it would be the only references we had of Spain that I know of in the Bible. But it's, I think it's, there's a trend to not have to deal with texts. I don't mean just the Bible, but texts in any culture, because it requires more knowledge, more study, more discipline. And as we lose these disciplines, it of course becomes much easier then to say, oh, we don't need that. It's obsolete when we're reconstructing society. I have a completely different attitude towards texts, and I think we have to be engaging them along with the material remains. Not to say one is better than the other, we require both in order to understand as best possible the ancient world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.